if I may introduce James Reilly, our three-time Space Shuttle astronaut who's flown on Atlantis, completed 5 spacewalks, been to Mir, the International Space Station a couple of times. How many millions of miles do you have?
18 million, something like that. So not a single one of them a freaking flying.
How does it feel to see this now after being on all those missions, to see the permanent mission, permanent home of Atlantis now?
You know, it was, the best way to say it is probably bittersweet, you know, bitter, and not really bitter, that's sort of a poor term, but Atlantis is 33 flights, you know, and we built these to fly 100 times, and so she still has lots of flights left in her. When we decided to retire the shuttle, it was for a specific purpose, and that was to move that budget into the Constellation program, which was going to take us back to low Earth orbit with the US vehicle, but also built as a modular system that would take us back to the moon and off to Mars, or to the asteroids, whatever our objectives would be. And so we canceled this program specifically so we could move that budget over. And unfortunately now we're in a situation where we have this canceled. We don't really have a Constellation program in the budget right now that will take us back to the moon and Mars. So we're kind of in between right now. So that's sort of the bitter part of it. The sweet part is she is in a configuration here that the only time you ever saw her like this was when we were outside doing a spacewalk. So people are getting to see Atlantis in a very unique setting here that is truly remarkable. And that when we saw the payload bay doors open here on the ground when she was flying, there was all kinds of structure around. So it was not like it was like being in a surgical theater. All you see is the part that you work on, and the rest of it's all masked off. You couldn't see it. But when she was in space, she looked just like this. And so you have the opportunity to see her in no other way. The other really nice thing about this too is that it's been interesting to watch the people as they come in as we practice some of the shows and see the impact that it has. And that's really one of the things we're hoping for, is that everything that's here, not just Atlantis, but everything that's here, becomes a key for the students or the kids, you know, that are going to be building this next century. Now, this was our century. This is the 20th century. Theirs is the 21st century. We're going to build whatever we do. And so what we hope is that what we did in the 20th century is that impetus, that spark, if you will, that brings them into the 21st and challenges them for the things that they will be accomplishing in their life.
What does it mean to have Atlantis here at the Kennedy Space Center?
It had to be here. You know, one of them had to be here because this is where they lived. The spacecraft lived here. We operated them here. Everybody that worked on them was here. So to have her here was, in my opinion, it's just JR's opinion, it's an absolute requirement. We had to have one of the shuttles here in Florida where she lived, flew, and landed. So having her here was really special. And of course, the folks here at the Visitor Center did just an absolutely phenomenal job putting this program together. I'm sure you've heard it costs a lot of money to do this, and it'll be something that will be a destination event for many people in the years to come.
Now, you would have had an astronaut type view of the bay doors before you did the spacewalk from this shuttle.
Yeah, absolutely.
What was it like doing that spacewalk for the first time?
Actually my very first spacewalk was out of the Atlantis, and we were putting the airlock on board the International Space Station. So my first 2 spacewalks were actually out of the airlock on Atlantis, and then our third spacewalk on that flight was out of the new airlock that was on the International Space Station. But that first spacewalk you're very focused. You know, you're thinking of all the things that you've choreographed, and it's probably a lot like going to the World Cup or the Super Bowl or some major sporting event where you're focused entirely on your job. And you don't even think about what's going on around you. You're not even aware of the presence of the crowd or the fact that you're on the field. All those things just kind of disappear behind you. And you're focused on the job. And that's the way I was getting ready for my first spacewalk. And when I actually went outside, I was exactly that way. But prior to going out on the first one, Yuri Usachev, who was the commander of Expedition 2 on the space station, came to me. First he gave a safety brief and said, okay, I had to tell you that, but here's what I really want to tell you. You're going to be so busy that you're going to have to concentrate and just take 10 seconds every hour, just look around, because that's what you come back with are your memories. And he was right. And so the first hour I was really focused on getting some work done. I was on the end of the arm. Janet Cavandi was driving the arm with me on it, and we'd been doing some work on the airlock in the payload bay of Atlantis. And then she picked me up out of the payload bay, and that was my 10 seconds. I had a chance to just kind of lean back and then look past the tail of Atlantis and look at that right there, and looked at the Earth going by the tail of Atlantis. And it was a remarkable emotional experience, to be honest. Walking out and seeing that yesterday when I saw that for the first time, because it took me back to that moment where I looked back and there's the Earth. And that is a pretty powerful moment to see the Earth and everything you know right there. It's flying behind Atlantis. And you're doing this amazing, wonderful experience, this thing that you wanted to do your whole life. And here it is. It's priceless.
Do you get the sense that it's going to be a long sort of hiatus before there is the kind of level of activity that there was during the shuttle program here at the Kennedy Space Center here on the Space Coast?
You know, it's hard to say. And there's two parts to it. One, there's a technological answer to that question, and we could do it anytime. You know, it's just all about the budget. The budget, of course, is controlled in Washington, and so it really just depends on getting the budget to allow us to go that next step. Our job is to open up space, if you will, for private companies to come in behind us, and that's what we've done in low Earth orbit. And we're going that direction with folks like SpaceX and Virgin Galactic and Sierra Nevada and all the people that are working on that next vehicle, but really a private sector vehicle. Our job at NASA is to push the frontiers of our knowledge even further out. And so our job is now to go that next step, go to where the private sector won't go yet, and open up that exploration environment to where we get past that sort of exploration for exploration's sake and step into the research phase, where we are with the International Space Station, which ultimately becomes a commercial phase of exploration, and go further out. We need to push further out and do what we are chartered to do at NASA, and that is literally push those frontiers out as far as we can take them. And that's why we hope that the next generation that's coming up behind us do exactly that. But of course, it all depends on at some level politics, and the politics have to be there to support it as well. And that's another thing that we hope this will eventually have that impact, is to put the money back in the budget so we can go back out there. Because in terms of real dollars out of taxpayers' pockets every year, it costs me $25 as a U.S. taxpayer to support not just the space program that we see here, but everything NASA does. And it's a lot of things, so I'd gladly spend that $25. In fact, I'd double it to $50 without even thinking about it, just to make all of this happen and keep the kids in this next generation focused on pushing out, not in. If we focus in, then we start losing that capability to push against those frontiers.
Did you ever have an exhibit like this as a kid that inspired you to get into this line of work?
It wasn't so much exhibits when I was a kid. It was the space program itself. I grew up with the space program. Al Shepard, John Glenn, all those guys were flying when I was a kid. In fact, John Glenn was my impetus, my mentor, if you will, even though he didn't know it. He was on his first flight, and a dentist asked me while I was sitting in his chair, would you like to be an astronaut someday? Get stuck. I followed all the missions, knew who everybody was. And one of the great things about our country is that you can try and try and try again as often as you want. And I was one of those. And it took me until I was 40 years old to get accepted into the space program. And then I got 13 years of just a great career at NASA. So I had that opportunity. So, but it wasn't so much a museum. It was an active program. Things were happening. We were flying to the moon when I was in high school. When I came down here in college at the Kennedy Space Center, we were flying Skyline. And so things were literally going on all around us. So it was a little bit more of an experiential event for me. But we're also recreating that here. That it's not just coming in and looking at this dusty spacecraft that we used to fly. This is something where there's a lot of hands-on, a lot of things that become an experience for the kids as they come into this. And that's one of the great things about this particular setup here.
And you think it'll have an impact on kids getting into STEM programs and aeronautics and all that?
That's the beauty of science and technology, and that it's exciting stuff. And the real beauty for kids now is that their lives are technological lives. They've grown up with this as second nature. You watch them with, I can just barely get a text message out, in minutes. They're doing it in seconds. They're just flying across these keypads, and it's a virtual experience that they're just used to, that we had to kind of adapt to because it grew around us. But they grow up in it, and so they've got an advantage that we didn't have. But they also have the ability to have it instantly make sense to them. And in terms of the science and the technology, even the mathematics, even though that's somewhat abstract, it's something that they can recognize as soon as they see it as being something exciting, fun, different, part of their lives from the very beginning. And so they've got a real advantage that we didn't have, being able to see that. Our challenge is to translate that a little bit too, because sometimes it's just like air. It's just there to kids. So we have to explain what is this marvelous machine that's sitting here that took us to space. All this stuff up there that built the International Space Station and built Hubble. We have to explain it. What does that mean? Where were we when we did this, and what has become in our knowledge from all this work that we have done? What does that mean to you? We have to be able to translate that, and of course that's what we start with here, and it's up to us as the adults and the teachers and the mentors that help expand that.
Do you have a special favorite memory out of all of your Atlantis missions? Which one really sticks out to you the most?
It's actually the answer to that is more of an abstract because there's a lot of things. Flying in this vehicle is just amazing. There's all the smells, the sights, the sounds, all these things that you experience that are really terrific. And one of the hardest questions I had to answer was, what was the best thing about all this? But flying in space. And it took me a long time to figure out the right answer for that. And it finally dawned on me one day when I was staring at pictures of my cruise, is that the best thing about flying in space, the thing that stands out about flying in Atlantis were the crews that I had an opportunity to fly with, the people that I trained with on the ground, all the people that we worked with on a daily basis, to make all this stuff happen. Those people were, every one of them were motivated. It wasn't a job for them to do this. This was a life. This was their life accomplishments. It was a lifestyle. We lived this stuff. And the people that I flew with on these flights are some of the best friends I'll ever have, and will always have. And that's the thing that I remember. In fact, last week I was visiting a friend of mine who was a crew member on my very first flight, and he and I just pick up our relationship no matter how long we've been apart, and just start talking about the last stuff we were talking about, which drives our wives crazy. That's the thing that I like the best. That's the one thing that stands out. But other things like that experience coming out doing the spacewalk and talking to Yuri and building the space station. We saw it go overhead recently, and you just kind of stand there on the beach, and there it goes. And you go, I got a chance to help build it. That was pretty special.
Do you get the sense that whatever the space program, whatever form it takes now, the next 10 years, is going to have the same kind of emotional impact or the same inspirational impact that it did on you when you were a kid?
It can, because it's all about doing something new. Right? So, doing things that are relatively routine, which is sort of what the space shuttle was designed to do, is to make space flight essentially routine. We were fairly successful at that, and rightly so. You go into that next phase of exploration, which is the research phase. That becomes much more routine. In the Antarctic, it was the heroic age in the 1910s, but now we're in the research phase. Nobody really knows that we're doing things in the Antarctic, which is fine, but we're learning an awful lot about our environment and our world here by studying there. Same thing in space. So we had the heroic age, when these first guys got off the planet and then went to the moon. The next phase, for the moon particularly, is to go to that research phase. But of course, when we go to Mars, or we go to the asteroids, whatever our next objective is, and we do it with humans, it's going to be the same kind of thing. It's going to be that heroic age, and that's going to be the challenge. It's going to be the excitement, and it's going to be the connection for that next generation that's coming behind us.
The view that we have the shuttle now, Where would you have got this view? Would you have got it from the space station, or is this something that nobody would ever get this close to see?
Well, this side of the shuttle, which we're looking at the belly of the shuttle here, is if you saw it while you were outside, that would probably be a bad thing, because that means you've probably come off and you're going to have to get yourself back, unless we had to do something on the outside. Now, the folks on the station actually saw the belly of the shuttle, because when we would rendezvous, we would actually do this sort of a flip, and what they would do is photograph the tiles that protect us from the heat or re-entry, plus the leading edges of the wings and the nose and the tail. They photographed all that, sent it to the ground to make sure we didn't have any damage. This was all done after Columbia, after that accident. So they would see it routinely, but those of us in the shuttle generally did not, until we got to the ground, and we would see that view when she was sitting on the runway after we would get out of the vehicle. And that was actually one of the things we'd all love to do, no matter what was going on. We wanted that time where we could just step out and just walk around and just appreciate, what we've just done, and what this vehicle has just done, and just have a moment where you can just sort of go, that was almost miraculous, that we just spent 2 weeks doing this incredible thing. So, that view would be something we would see, and it would still be hot, so you can put your hand up next to it and feel the heat radiating from the tiles and from the nose cap after we do our walk around. My pleasure. Thanks for coming.